Hi, okay, so before I get into like the tender, juicy meat of this video, what? Okay, I just want to say real quick that I have no editing skills whatsoever, so I'm sitting in my bathroom at 4 a.m. filming this on my iPhone, and I'm probably just gonna throw it all together in iMovie. I also have my laptop next to me, so I can read some things off of it that I wrote down before I started recording, so I don't like lose my train of thought or whatever. So it's probably not gonna be the most visually pleasing thing to watch, but I hope that like the content, what I'm saying, is good enough for you to stay till the end. So. Okay, so first I want to preface this video by trying to establish a little bit of credibility for myself, and in doing that I want to make it explicitly clear that I'm not trying to come off as pretentious in any way. I just want it to be known that this topic is not new to me. I just feel like I have to prove that I'm actually educated on this in response to comments that I get quite frequently where people will just dismiss everything I have to say because they assume that I have no idea what I'm talking about. So one of the things I've noticed within the past few years is that nowadays everybody seems to have an opinion on politics, as opposed to like before the most recent election, where if you would ask people about their political opinions, a lot of them would just be like ignorant or apathetic. And many of those people now just sort of have an eclectic understanding of like how the world works, so their opinions on things can be pretty inconsistent. What I'm really trying to make known is that I didn't just like wake up one day, read a couple articles on the internet, and then decide, you know what, I'm gonna be a communist. So I actually was privileged enough to grow up in a household that promotes learning and individuality, and I became interested in politics by the time I was like 9 or 10 years old. And I really just ended up like throwing myself into it. I researched topics from like every side I could find, and I even got the opportunity to travel to countries in Europe, Asia, and South America just to try to get like different points of view from different people around the world and really try to get an accurate gauge on like how everybody in the world is thinking and feeling right now. Dude, I know I say so much, but it gives my brain like time to pause and think about what I'm about to say. And to be honest, I went into it fairly unbiased, and so I've reached a point where I found a political outlook as well as a philosophy that best coincides with my own morals. All of that being said, I'm aware that just because I've researched and studied this extensively, it doesn't make me inherently correct, and I'm not in any way trying to claim that it does. I just want to be taken seriously. So now that that's out of the way, I'm going to be addressing some common misconceptions about communism, and this is the part where I like have my laptop pulled up and I'm going to be reading some things I wrote down, so I'm so sorry for lack of eye contact. I'll try. The first misconception I wanted to address is that Karl Marx invented communism. The concept of communism, like at its core, has been around for millions of years, whereas capitalism has only been around for like 600 years, give or take. In the earliest hunter and gatherer societies, cooperation and sharing of resources was essential to survival, so communism was like a basic human instinct. What Karl Marx worked to do was sort of bring back its relevance along with the philosophy of dialectical materialism, which in simple terms states that human thoughts and ideas shift in accordance with matter and motion. So Marxism does not necessarily equal communism. The second misconception, my favorite one, is that communism doesn't work. Okay, by the dictionary definition of communism, no country has yet been able to establish a communist economic system. Countries like the Soviet Union and China, where the proletariat came to power during the Industrial Revolution and tried to establish communism, were unsuccessful. This is because the material conditions to support a communist economic system simply were not in place at the time. The level of technology they had back then was not advanced enough to create the abundance of resources necessary for the well-being of the entire community. The same thing can be said for other countries that have been or are currently considered to be communist. So this part is actually the whole reason I decided to make this video in the first place. There were a couple videos I posted on TikTok, one of them being where I like briefly said that you can't prove that communism doesn't work because there's never been an authentically communist nation. A lot of people said that my argument fell under the no true Scotsman fallacy, which would be implying that I'm defining communism in a biased way, but in reality I'm using the dictionary definition of it and applying that to countries that claim to have been communist. So the reason that a truly communist economic system was never implemented in those countries is not because it's fundamentally flawed, but because it just was not the right time or place. The third misconception would be that under communism, everybody gets the exact same thing. When a lot of people picture a communist society, they think of like cookie cutter houses and everybody being served the same like gray slop for every meal. When in reality, the objective of communism is to give everybody equal opportunity and equal access to basic necessities, so that nobody has to starve or freeze to death or not have their medical needs met simply because they can't afford it. It would not strip away individuality. The appeal of capitalism to a lot of people is the opportunity that they have to climb the ranks and get super rich and be able to afford everything you could ever want or need. But that only happens for very few people under capitalism. A lot of people end up stuck working minimum wage jobs and living paycheck to paycheck, which provides no way to accumulate wealth. And that makes it so that no matter how hard you work, it's nearly impossible under capitalism to escape the cycle of poverty. Like I mentioned before, the main reason why communism has never been successfully implemented is because of scarcity. But now that the robotic and electronic revolution is like unfolding before our eyes, I would argue that communism is necessary. As more and more jobs continue to become automated, workers are getting laid off and thrown into the impoverished class, while the people at the top just keep getting more and more money, creating an even greater polarization as the so-called middle class dwindles. The last misconception that I wanted to talk about today is that under a communist economic system, there'd be no incentive for people to work. And prior to the robotic and electronic revolution that is upon us now, this would have been true. But in a world where every occupation could be automated, there wouldn't even be a need for anybody to work at all. Everybody's needs would be met and people could live in a world with not only their basic necessities, but they could also be comfortable and happy. Okay, I do want to keep this video short, but I also want it to be known that everything that I've discussed today is really just the tip of the iceberg, and I want to make more videos where I go deeper into some of these topics, and I also want to be able to respond to like DMs and comments that I get. Lastly, I want to say that right now we're living in a time where the people that are truly in control of the United States, like the richest of the rich, who truly benefit from communism, are working extremely hard to preserve it. So you end up with people like Donald Trump, who point fingers and blame illegal immigration or liberals for all the problems in this country. As well as on the left, you sometimes see people blaming conservative citizens for everything that's wrong. The greatest majority in this country is the 99% working class, and the 1% ruling class will continue to try to divide us amongst ourselves because they know that we have the numbers. And if everybody were to gain class consciousness and see the flaws that run so deep in our system, then we would be unified, and they wouldn't be able to stop us from making real change. And whether you see it or not, we're living in an extremely volatile time. It is up to each and every one of us in the working class to not let them keep us divided.